Hello and welcome to the 10th Revolution Group Tech Success Podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with industry-leading tech professionals. My name is Catherine Lord, and today I'm joined by Danielle Bridge from Black Minds Matter. A warm welcome to you. Would you like to let our listeners know a little more about you and your career history to date?
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Catherine. It's lovely to be here. So, my name's Danielle Bridge, Chief Executive of Black Minds Matter UK, which is a registered charity. The objectives of the charity are to deliver one-to-one talking therapy, deliver awareness and education to our community, and also advocate in terms of long-term systems change. The organisation was founded in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd and in the height of the global pandemic, where £1.5 million was raised as a direct response to the trauma that the Black community felt at the time. My background is in founding a social enterprise, which I founded in 2010, I think it was. Gosh, that's a long time ago, which specialised in delivering physical and mental health first aid training to the community, specifically targeting those people that needed it but didn't actually have to have it via work. And my experience in the mental health sector, I was a chair of the Cambridge Mental Health Network, and I was a mental health first aid instructor. So quite a lot of stuff around the mental health field, if you like.
Brilliant. And so going on to the first kind of main question, how do you believe firms can work most effectively to provide inclusive cultures?
Great question. I think the first thing that organisations need to do or firms need to do is to understand what the actual challenges are. And I think in today's society, lots of people have got lots of things to say on an individual basis, but listening to those individual stories, you will find a theme. And so it's important to understand and recognise what the challenges are. And you can only find out what those challenges are by inviting those people affected to those tables. And talking about tables, offering a seat at the highest table within the firm is super important. I think, especially in this field, particularly around racialised and marginalised communities, there is a lack of representation at those tables. And so therefore, it's difficult to have a voice that's heard directly at that level. And I think it's only then when together people can find solutions to those challenges. I think also what's important is that individuals educate themselves on the challenges faced by marginalised and racialised communities. And what I mean by that is not asking the person who's there that represents that part of the community, right? So doing some learning and unlearning around some of the difficulties that racialised and marginalised communities face is a really, really important thing from an individual point of view to understand what needs to happen. And the reason why I say individually is because those individuals then go towards a collective, and that collective then has the power to, incite change within an organization. And finally, I think it's super important to be honest and brave, being honest about what people do or do not know, being honest about historical challenges that people have had to deal with is super important. And in terms of bravery, learning to be uncomfortable and sitting in comfortable spaces is also really, really important. It's not going to be easy when you're listening to these stories, but empathy and understanding is key to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, people just don't always understand fully if they've not been in that situation themselves. So, the education piece is so important.
Yeah, what you talk about there, interestingly, not being there themselves, something I used to talk about all the time is the frame of reference, right? Your frame of reference, our individual frames of reference are the things that we live via, our window of the world, our experiences, everything that makes us who we are on that particular day or that particular time. But one's frame of reference is very, very different from another's. And so it's really hard to put ourselves in the position of other people, especially if we've never lived that life ourselves. So I think it's really important to understand that and to start from that position and just be open-minded and curious.
Yeah, no, interesting. And from your perspective, what is the greatest barrier?
The greatest barrier specifically around difficulties for our community are systemic racism. And I know that is going to literally, the minute I say it, people go,
oh, it's a red flag.
Yes, yeah. It's a red flag. But that's the truth, unfortunately. And people, like I said before, being brave and being curious and being open-minded, when the community tell you what's going on, you have to believe them. It's super important. And this isn't just an individual perspective. This is kind of clouded in fact and in data. The Institute of Government and Public Policy states that institutional racism is often subtle and ingrained in organizational structures, which then in turn leads to disparities in hiring, promotion, and workplace culture. So that is a written document, right, that says that. That's not me. That's what that document says. And also a 2023 report by the Resolution Foundation found that people of minoritized communities are more likely to be insecure in work and twice as likely to be unemployed compared to their white counterparts. So there are a lot of statistics and a lot of data out there that will feed into this narrative and, prove that point. It just means that people have to be open-minded enough to read it and to really take it into consideration.
Okay. And what proportion of companies are taking wellbeing seriously, and how can that be adapted for Black communities within each firm? I know I've recently become a mental health first aider. It's interesting to know what firms are doing out there.
Do you know what? I have no idea how many firms are taking it seriously. I don't know. I would like to think that most organizations are taking it seriously. And
yes,
in my experience, an awful lot of organizations are trying really hard to try and make a difference, right? But like you said earlier on, it's a complex and complicated situation. But instead of kind of going at it with this is a problem, we need to fix it, it's about understanding, unlearning, learning more, and doing it really slowly and with intent versus, right, okay, well, this is what we need to do, let's just tick this box. So I think it's super important that organizations know that it's a mindset and culture shift versus right, this is a problem, let's fix it and get it done. Change takes time. It really does. And I think, you probably recognize there was an awful lot of organizations that were investing in ED&I, an awful lot of organizations that were working around ESG, that were kind of looking at these targets and, right, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do. But actually what came out of that was an awful lot of initiatives around, organizations and around targeted groups, specifically around the human rights. So it's important that we take time to get this right and to do it well once versus, right, let's do it and seeing it fail. So although I can't answer how many companies are actually taking it seriously, I would like to think that everybody's got the right idea. They're just struggling with how to make sure that work is done and done correctly.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So final kind of advice or question, what's your top tip for the audience for educating and building resilience? You're obviously speaking it day in, day out. So yeah, what's your top tip?
So there's a couple here, and I will give you two if that's okay. So number one is education is every single person's responsibility. I've been in many rooms talking about this subject, and I'm only ever speaking to the people who are directly involved, namely the Black community, right? The Black community know what the challenges are, but for reasons I mentioned earlier on, they often hold no power to execute change at an organisational level. So therefore, organisations need to adopt policies that promote diversity and equity. They need to provide training on unconscious bias and cultural competence, regularly report on diversity metrics, work on building that inclusive culture. A leadership commitment is also important, right? Don't leave this to people on the ground doing the work. It has to have organizational buy-in from the very top. And then finally, to your point of resilience means, by definition, the ability to bounce back in the face of difficulties and challenges. I would like to speak on behalf of the Black community at this point, saying resilience is something that we have in droves because we have no choice. So although we are a resilient group of individuals, we're tired. So it's really important that need to continue to bounce back when faced with all of these disparities, specifically in this sector, is really difficult. So resilience is a really tricky one, but in terms of some tips, I've given a few there. So hopefully that'll make a little bit of a difference.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for speaking today. It's been very insightful, and good luck in 2025. Hope the charity continues to strive forward.